Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us. I'm Richard Seline with Roar Partners and Future Proofing America. I'm very, very excited for us to share a little bit more depth to our announcement before the holidays of partnering and collaborating with Entoro and Jim and his team. Um, Jim and I have been talking about a number of pieces around pre-disaster and risk mitigation and financing. And so he's been a trusted friend, trusted partner with our Resilience Capital Investment Stack working group. And today really culminates or launches uh, something I sense could be transformative uh, for communities, neighborhoods, industries. Uh, Will, if you'll go to the next slide. We've got a full agenda, but this is intentional to be a briefing where we give you at least what we hope is enough background beyond what I've already shared in the FAQ, the frequent asked questions, but we may still not have all of those questions answered. We'll do that today. And Jim, if, as you and I discussed, we're available for some one-on-ones or team, afterward. I thought what we would do is provide context for, what's driving these needs to identify alternative financing tools, um, and then really turn this over to Jim to get into how these resilience credits evolve and how they become securities and investable instruments. We'll talk a little bit about some of the scenarios that we think are available, and then obviously want your feedback and questions in the hour that we've got prepared. Will, if you'll go to the next one. So a little bit about us. Uh, Roar Partners is we have really what we call the think and do tank. The think tank is comprised of the folks that you see on this screen that have been working with us over the past 2 years, developing what we now call the Future Proofing America framework, which is very, very focused on the objectives of addressing these key areas and questions that have somewhat limited progress for what is a 4.4, close to now 5 trillion amount of losses in the United States. About half of that, about 2.5 trillion just alone since the over the past 2, 3 years. We've assembled this group of really smart folks with all the capabilities of their own expertise, as well as their own project implementation, project execution. And as a result of that, I think this is a core group that should be considered a part of your team with our ability to do what we're trying to get done here. Next slide. So why this? Why now? You can read faster than I can, but we've identified these 6 kind of drivers across the United States around the challenges for addressing persistent and ongoing disasters, whatever the geography, the asset class. A couple of these things that have really driven us to move forward, Jim, and move where we are in our launch today is obviously insurance continues to go up, or the gap in obtaining that insurance becomes even more challenging. Number one, if you can't get a mortgage, if you can't get insurance, and at the same time, the amount of defaults that are resulting or cascading from these different disasters is impacting the economics and the fiscal competitiveness of communities and states Um, the bigger part, Jim, that we're finding is how much asset devaluation is being built into large portfolios of real estate, whether it's residential, commercial, or even public-private type of real estate projects. So what we've wanted to do, and what I think we're now putting and have put in place, is to address these six challenges. Next slide. So with our data analytics under our resilience data exchange comprised of CoreLogic, Cotality, Risk Thinking AI, and others, we now know that 12% of the U.S. landmass is forecasted already to represent 90% of the risk exposure. So we pretty much know where in the United States, which counties, which cities, all the way over to which private sector assets and operations are in some of the most vulnerable areas of the country where we want to work with you all in going in and addressing and providing a solution set. Next slide. So in our analysis, Jim, and in our working with over 200 experts across the country, what we've decided is we gave you six reasons, Jim, for, what were the challenges. Um, and now, really what are potentially the six compelling reasons of things that we're trying to address. One of which is first cost hurdles. No one, whether it's private sector or public sector, wants to spend money up front that they cannot see a cost benefit or return. Our analysis, our forecasting tools, and now the financial tools that we're presenting seek to address how to overcome what may be 20 to 30% more expense to future-proof your asset, to make it ready for the next event, and therefore reduce your losses, reduce your business continuity challenges, all the way over to what it does for the tax base, for the fiscal side of governments that are also now seeing the devolution from Washington, D.C., out of the federal back to states and localities. Next slide, please. So our Future Proofing America framework, Jim, is really core to delivering this ready for resilience approach, this resilience as a service approach. But what I have found our true differentiator is working with you, Jim, and your team and others on addressing the capital formation and investment side of this, meaning we're not just trying to tell you what your risks look like, where your problems are. We are coming to the table with a package of solutions to move on now. Next slide. So you'll see the slides. You'll get a chance to look at this. We've put together 100 billion data points, all the way down to the county, zip code, census tract, parcel level on a forecasted basis. It allows us to look right now, Jim, but also 5 to 7 years out, all the way over to 15 to 25, 30 years out, corresponding to the financial demands of a project. Next. Working with Gensler and other parts of our technology partners, such as Intertech, which I'll talk about in a little bit, who are helping us on, Jim, our ability to support you in our securitization, the ability to inspect, monitor, verify, report. But what we've been looking at is not just a parcel, not just a building, but how this ultimately impacts a multi-purpose type of real estate, especially what we now refer to as resilience districts, which are special purpose districts that are financeable based on what you'll hear from Jim. Next slide. Those special purpose districts are ones that are encouraged by Jim and some of our work with others that are also on this call. Our feedback from Cone Resnick, which is one of the largest advisors to state and local governments, private sector about forming these types of districts. And Jim, as you know, what we've looked at is basing this off of the original municipal utility district concept, which is really a public-private partnership between developers and governments on getting the infrastructure in place. What we've now moved towards is a resilience utility district across the horizontal, meaning we want to make sure that the land plan is put in place on the horizontal that can measurably and persistently reduce risk exposure. And that includes the elements, Jim, of our smart watersheds, which we know this concept, Jim, that you've advised us to, and now we're launching. There's been an attempt in Maryland, an attempt in the state of Florida to create credits for new watershed flood detention retention programs. And we also have added this one resilient grid around power and energy. So we believe these tools you're looking at on land use and create this new functionality and are investable elements of what Jim will show. Next. This all fits into our overarching resilience capital investment stack that we're honored to have Hilltop Securities, Oppenheimer, others, including obviously Entoro, meaning that capital is not the issue anymore. And it really hasn't been. What we've identified are multiple sources of capital investment that we now can bring to the table. And that's one of the other messages here is we're looking for projects to work with you on, with your teams, with your customers and clients that we can go back to and say, look, the work that we did prior was great, but the landscape is changing and evolving even more. We've got the ability to do the forecasting. We've got the ability to do the engineering and the construction and the design and architecture. What we want you to hear is we've got the capital and the sources of capital to bring to the table for and with you all. Next slide. So what you're going to hear from Jim is we have looked at structuring projects, confirming with boots on the ground for the inspection, verification, the reporting, not just once, but to consistently monitor the performance so that insurance, reinsurance, mortgage, pricing, the issues of the insurance gap can be addressed, all the way over to how are we looking at 5 years out to continue to achieve this level and value of resilience, whether it's a 1-6 or 1-11 cost benefit. So with that, Jim, next slide. We're very, very honored that Jim and his team are helping bring these pieces together. Jim, with that as a setup, let me turn it over to you with hopefully a sense that we have the elements now in place. What you're going to share, I think, is beyond innovative and is really perfectly timed to where the market is today. So, Jim, thank you. The table's yours.
Thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate it. If anybody has difficulty hearing me, let me know. I'm calling from a hotel in Mexico, so my apologies if the signal's a little weak. Let me give you a little background. I think the next slide is pretty good. Entoro is a financial services group. We were formed about 12 years ago. We've done a number of innovative things in the last 12 to 15 years. We did one of the first digital securities in the US. We did the first NFT as a security. We did the first um, crypto exchange in El Salvador, did the first all digital transfer agent. We've created a number of structured products along the way. My own background is energy, been the CEO of a public oil and gas company, a number of private ones. I've also had my some experience in the development world. I was actually at the World Bank IFC for 4 years as well. So just we're trying to capture all of this and bring it forward. Now, as far as Entoro, by the way, I talk fast, so if anybody wave, wave your hand if I'm going too fast, but I always feel it makes people pay attention a little bit more. Uh, the the basis of Entoro all circulates around the broker dealers. So we are licensed in all 53 jurisdictions in the U.S. Uh, we have 5 regulated businesses: broker dealer, an RIA, transfer agent, commodity pool operator, and a Texas insurance broker as well. We are not a insurance company. However, we are doing something for the art world and doing some things. And also, we are the operating entity of a merchant bank of a tribe here in the United States. So we do a number of things through captive entities as well. So we do a number of unique things out there. Now, with all of that, we've integrated those 5 regulated businesses along with Capturient, which was the first and only registry and exchange for non-nature based carbon credits and other natural capital instruments, as well as an entity we started in 2013 called Clear Rating, which is a valuation company. And we've conducted 450 bespoke valuations of projects and companies in the last 12 to 15 years. So that kind of gives you why we have this circle here is kind of the integrated nature of what we do. We also have been one of the biggest proponents of changing the dialogue in the carbon credit space to being one of securitization and not just grants, giveaways, and wasted time and effort. If you have things like water rights and carbon markets, et cetera, if you're going to put this legislation in place, we believe then you should be using the capital markets infrastructure and tools to solve those problems and issues and not make it worse by having things that have no tangible teeth or really ability to get something done. Uh, and I'll kind of go through that and some of the efforts that we're doing right now. The real philosophy we have is that a lot of issues, be it resilience, be it carbon, be it water, be it whatever, can actually be solved with the proper financial instruments. Here on this slide here that we'll just put up is just a highlight of anything. Richard, are you making this deck available to everybody, or are
Yes,
you?
sir.
Or
Yeah.
okay.
After the
So,
both, we'll edit the recording a little bit and we'll get that out, but we'll also make the deck obviously available as an additional attachment.
perfect. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to get a hold of Richard or myself, and happy to answer those going forward. Next slide, Will. The uh, the one thing I'd like to say on the resilient side is that we're taking some of the existing instruments that we're working in the natural capital space and really repositioning them for the same purpose. In fact, in early November in London, we announced 2 new financial products in the natural capital space. So we don't use ESG. We've never have. We've always been on the forefront of what I call Generation 2, and that is the securitization model versus the old. For those of you on the call that know and understand and are familiar with the VCM market, the voluntary carbon market, we've been the biggest proponent globally about getting away from just the voluntary carbon market and actually making it what we call the Gen 2 market, which is really securitization. And by the way, all the rules for all of this have been in place for years globally. when it comes to that space, where you had UN FCCC rules, you had the CBAMs, you have all of these Corsia, you have all of these schemes. Um, they're all there. Just most people were not conducting activities properly. And for those of you that are knowledgeable in this space, it takes an LOA, a letter of authorization from a federal government to actually get those things approved. So for those of you that don't know this, about 99.7% of all carbon credits that have been issued to date are effectively worthless. So unless you go through the right steps, you're not going to find anything of value. And if you don't have something of value, as Richard will testify, you can't sell it, you can't raise money, you can't do mitigation, you can't do risk management, you can't do anything that it doesn't make sense. Because effectively in the environmental space over the last 20 years, a lot of it has just been moving the deck of, the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. It hasn't really been a productive effort. So that being said, we created a couple instruments, and as I mentioned, we are 100 percent focused on creating instruments that can be actually bought, sold, traded, and banked on and accounted for. So that creates a security. So in London, as I mentioned, we announced two products, Clean and Leon. Clean is the collateralized liquid environmental asset notes, basically a prepay for carbon credits. You can actually do the same thing for water rights and other activities. What we've done is created it down so instead of a 4-month process, it can be done in, if it was in a perfect world, you could do it in less than 4 days, but humans are involved, so it takes more like 4 weeks. So what we've done is standardized, templated, et cetera. So those of you that are familiar with things like the ISDA agreements and other things, that's what we're trying to do, is get it so things are boilerplate and standardized. So when you have project sponsors, resilience, whatever that may be, is that we can actually put it through the proverbial black box of the securitization world and create those financial instruments that have ISINs and QSIPs and everything like that. And as uh, I don't know the whole audience, but I'm assuming the majority of this audience is very knowledgeable in financial terms, is that once you've created a security, you've created something that now that can go on a balance sheet. And once it goes on a balance sheet, now it has real value in real life, because now it's really just a pricing issue on what that value is. So that's where we've been moving our entire book, both at the sovereign level, the sub-sovereign level, the other governmental activities, various sponsors globally around the world in all sectors, both nature-based and non-nature-based, to create these instruments that can be used for Corsia activities, CBAM, anything in the Article 6 world, since the U.S. is no longer part of that. That's kind of null and void for U.S. activities. However, the instruments are still applicable in the U.S. Categories if when you have a schema that actually is appropriate. Now, the other instrument we have besides Clean on the prepaid for the carbon credits is something called Leon, which is liquid environmental outcomes notes. And one of the other offshoots of that is that we're really focused on this, given that we're Houston based like Richard, and I'm an energy guy. Uh, I think the world has been focused on carbon. That's not necessarily the evil. The evil is really things like methane, and we created the MOB, the methane outcomes bond, and we're working with a number of both private and NOCs, national oil companies, to use that instrument as a way to mitigate and have the outcomes for that. So credits can be created, et cetera. Now, Leon is both a prepay for carbon credits as well as a project financing tool. So,
Jim, let me interrupt for 1 second, because I think you're raising a good point, and we may want to go to the next slide. Is I think what we both realized, and that folks on this call have realized, is that there are byproducts of any of these activities. And these byproducts can either be an offset to something else, or the byproduct has a value that can be also securitized and transferred. So as you said, if you do something, you're reducing some exposure. Other activities, you're doing something and it produces an additional benefit. And I think that's what we're both saying is if you think of this in a little bit broader terms, we are looking at two sides. Jim, let me see if I'm saying this correctly. We're looking at two sides of the same coin. There is an asset, there is a value. It could create a compliance related solution, and or it could create additional value from producing an additional product. Am I saying that right, Jim?
Correct. And look, we've set up a process. And by the way, we can change the name of Clean or Leon to Resistance Bonds Are Us. You get my
Right,
point.
right,
It's literally what we've worked on is actually the creating those instruments, and whether or not it's used for water or carbon or methane or what have you. That is to me just another flavor. It's not necessary. It doesn't change the underlying structures, because
right.
what has been absent for a long time is the ability to, well, you have a MRV issue all the time, like a metering and kind of verification process. That's a separate discussion. Let's look.
Right.
I'm assuming we have that in some form or fashion.
MRV
Be,
being monitoring, reporting, and verifying, which is a part
correct.
of what we've addressed now in our partnerships, where boots on the ground can physically go look at it, but we can also leverage, the amount of the digital twin data that exists that also is a part of monitoring on an ongoing basis. Right.
Correct. And we don't do that for a couple of reasons. One issue is that that's really an expertise. That's a function and expertise of somebody that really does that all the time. We
And that's
we
what
have to,
Roar is packaging, Jim, on the front
yeah.
end of this, right?
And
Okay.
and to me, I put the analogy that's those are like audited financial statements to me. I don't do audited financial statements, but I take those audited financial statements and create a security with them. You see
Right.
where the
Yeah.
analogy comes in for me. So I don't care personally whether or not Deloitte does it, or some other accounting firm does the MRV, as long as they're a qualified group, right? So I don't get it. I don't have a dog in that fight. But what I do is we take those financials, much like an MRV, and then create that security with it.
Right.
Um,
Let's go to the
our
next slide, Will.
our our function, Richard, as you well know, is we're going to be specializing create taking that that funnel, putting it into the box,
Right.
creating securities, and then marketing those securities as well,
Yep.
and valuing them when we need to, when through Clear Rating, which is a independent group within the Entoro family.
Yep. I
Sorry
think
if that
Jim.
was overly
No,
not. I don't think
no,
it's
no, no.
complex. It's just
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah. And Jim, I think what you and I have agreed on is that one of the issues is there's a lot of studies, a lot of reports, a lot of, wringing of hands. There's, this repository, that library, all that. I think both of us are now really responding to this get stuff done kind of mindset. And that is, let's just get on with the projects. Let's start putting, shovels to work and, getting the financing. And therefore, the speed by which we're seeking to do this is not to be, sloppy, miss anything. We know there's a lot of regulatory oversight, as there should be. We know that there's a lot of pieces that we need to make sure on these special purpose vehicles, for all forms of financing that are addressed. But this doesn't need to be months. We feel pretty comfortable that once we on Roar's side are able to uh, put what Jim and others need on paper, so to speak, that we can move pretty quickly to converting it into the investment vehicles that we're presenting. Next slide.
Correct. Correct. Uh, so just some of the actual tangible things that get done in that, and I think most people on this call are familiar with the process of of creating a security. Because one of the questions I always get when I'm talking to kind of the environmental world is like, well, who's your regulator? Regulate well, probably the one that's the toughest, Securities and Exchange Commission. How about that one, right? That one, that's a pretty tough one, and this is where things actually become a lot better when you securitize them, because now you have the transparency. You should have the trust of the broker dealer, other experts that they've created, and are looking and have a fiduciary duty to making sure things get checked and double checked, which you didn't have in a non-regulated, non-financially regulated world. So this is what we're bringing to the table, is that discipline, analysis, focus, process, and speed to market. That's really what we're not only advocating but can do. We literally have billions of dollars in activity, really outside of the United States, for a lot of these natural capital tools. In fact, we're a big fan of using that phrase and using it um, to really demonstrate that, yes, it can be a profit making opportunity. It can be a positive, because if you're just doing certain things, that's a grant. That's just a grant.
Right.
And that doesn't really make sense for somebody like me. If that's what it is, that's a government transfer. And that's not something I'm really all that interested in. So that's a big driver for us, is to have that discipline in the activity. We're additionally, Richard, and it's outside of the scope of this conversation, but we're setting up a very, very large fund out of London to basically arbitrage and raise capital for various instruments, right? So
Right.
we take a much more active role outside of the U.S., and that has everything to
Well,
do with
sad but true,
non
Jim. We've
non.
talked. Yeah, sad but
Well,
true.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad but
We're,
true in a number of areas, but it's some of it is market discipline. Okay,
right.
so I'm a
Right.
market discipline. So
Let me play off
it
and
is what it is.
go to the next slide, Will. Um, so I think playing off of this, let me comment about the grants. So these could be, you know, impact grants, they can be philanthropy. We have a mechanism, as Jim is aware, and as some of y'all are aware, through this Resilience Community Trust, which is a 501c3 investment vehicle for corporate philanthropy foundations and impact donor advised funders. We're still under, all forms of what you're seeing on this slide. But I think what's really, really important is that we have a structure, as Jim is describing, in this collaboration for you all to leverage and truly exploit. Is we are recognizing that what we want to do is take off the burden from you, those on the call, and others, from having to, quote unquote, worry about these elements. And what we're saying is the instruments can be formed. We know that they can meet all the forms of regulatory compliance. We can support it with all forms of data. Jim, I think what you've stated is grants play a role. They are sometimes, non, here's the money, go do something with it. We have a way to deal with that. In this case, what we're really saying is there's no reason why any of this capital that's been sitting on the sidelines, to some degree in the ESG bucket, so to speak, should have any reason to hesitate now to move into the market, because we have this type of structure. Am I saying that
Uh,
right, Jim, the right way?
it is, and it's just what I want to do is articulate that what we bring to the table is specialization in that black box of taking those things, putting it through the process, and creating security. I don't get into the public policy issue. You get my point.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's not my expertise. I'm not good at it. So we want to focus on what we're good at, and that is doing securitization, that is creating a security recruit and having that process, and at the end of the day, matching buyers and sellers, and creating portfolios and doing the types of things that makes sense to me, because that becomes risk management. Those are those are
Right.
the financial tools we want to be able to advocate, articulate, create, etc. Not I'm not, I shouldn't say I'm not interested in the other side. It's just that that's not my specialty, and I want
No,
to
no,
focus
no,
on what
no.
we're gonna.
And again, that fits into this larger, this is a piece of the puzzle that we have finally put in place. The puzzle, or so to speak, the top of the box that we've been looking at now has the puzzle pieces inside the box. This is but one of them. Jim, a couple of questions that folks are asking, and some of these are a little bit more technical than I may understand, or and others may know better. A question is, are groups like STC and DTC a part of the regulatory environment?
I think it's SEC, or is it STC? Well, if they're talking about the Depository Trust Corporation, the answer is yes, because that's a transfer. When you're transferring a security,
Yeah,
you would use a CUSIP or an ICE, and so the DTC,
yeah,
we would do it. I mean, if we do it, we would initially start off using our transfer agent, which is called One Transfer, and as I mentioned, we do all of that ourselves. So. Uh, if somebody's got if they've misspelled STC for SEC, the answer is part of the regulatory environment. The answer is an emphatic yes. And if it was actually not DTC, but CFTC, the answer is also yes, given some of the current legislation on what's considered a digital security and some of the things that are going to be promoted going forward, and some of the, some of the legislation on the Hill, it would be part of that. Um, it depends on where some of these resilience plays end up coming in. But as
right.
far as my regulatory world, the answer would be yes. I'm speculating, John. If you may want to clarify that a little bit,
Or
I'm
send an
happy to
email and
answer.
we can, yeah, we
You-
can. Jim,
I'm happy to answer that.
let me go back to something and really try to open up some of the dialogue uh, with folks putting questions or comments in. Um, let's go back to a use case scenario. All right. So we have a resilient utility district or a resilient zone. That is a special purpose vehicle designated, tax increment, with a very specific purpose for which the resources, the funds from that district will be used to directly impact reducing the forecasted risk exposure. Um, to do that, it could be a smart watershed with our partners at Opti and Merrick Labs and others. Um, and what we're doing is we're creating a true transformation of both water quantity and water quality. So in the state of Maryland, as an example, they brought together the regional EPA, the state environmental uh, folks, others on the public sector side, Jim, and they also brought Walmart, Prudential, and the Nature Conservancy. And the idea has always been that around the Chesapeake Bay, because of different floods and weather conditions, um, there are opportunities to limit that flooding, so to speak, onshore, but also to reduce the degradation of the water quality, meaning toxins, fertilizers, and others. What Maryland has sought in the past is to say that if you can generate these types of impacts, turn them into credits, then you can securitize those. And I may not need all the credits, Jim, but somebody else does. Similar, again, as you said about carbon capture. In Florida, very, again, similar scenario on the water side, where Jacksonville, sought to convert a part of their land that a developer wanted but to convert and exchange the land for a detention retention smart water. We know we can do the same thing on generating all forms of power, whether it's geothermal, solar, wind, battery storage, whatever. And the use of those tools can create a credit. So I think, Jim, what we're saying to this audience is bring a project forward, bring a concept forward. Let's put it through, this engine, so to speak, and let's figure out how to help public, private, and even philanthropic interest now monetize these types of projects at scale.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, Richard, I can create or we can create an instrument. It can be financially viable. It can have all of the requirements to being able to measure and monitor it all, et cetera. The key is what are the offtake rules and who are the buyers? Right? And why are the buyers interested? Okay, at the end of the day, you can create a Walmart full of products, but who are the buyers? Are you creating the right instruments? And this is where historically in the carbon market has been, you either had compliance or you had VCM, and it was really because companies wanted to have a feel good thing. They didn't want to look like they were not doing something. But if you actually have tax breaks, you have some carrots more than sticks. Then you
Right.
actually you have buyers. And I, I would be remiss in saying I know everything in the resilience world on who all the buyers would be. What I'm saying is that we have a machine that can create the instruments to get it to being able to being sold. That now we have to assess who that buyer market is in those particular situations. Like in the water example that you had in Maryland, there may be some really interesting things there that that can be done. I don't have all
Right.
the facts.
Right. But Jim, I think what you just emphasized is um, this is we are seeking to accelerate the market by creating a securitized product, which we can, by knowing that it can be transferred. And let me make sure I'm saying this right, Jim, is one of the steps along the way. And Will, can you go to that next slide? I think it's on this topic, but kind of our checklist. Yeah. Um, One, we need to make sure that whatever this credit incentive that we're seeking to securitize, who owns it and can it be transferred? Can it be moved? Right? That means that working with some of the governmental entities who also are going to benefit from this, understand, what needs to be built into the credit, the incentive, the program appropriately. Check mark. That's one way that we move this forward. Second of all is how do we verify two things, Jim, or validate? One is that it is an investment grade opportunity, but it's driven by forecasted actionable intelligence that says if you don't do X, this is what it's really going to look like in the way of your losses, damage, business continuity. All right. And as such, what I think we want to make sure is that whatever the project that you all want to bring to us and present to us and work with and jointly develop can meet this checklist right up front so that we're helping you create the results that you want. Um, and I think, Jim, the other part that you're emphasizing is we need to recognize that there are also state and local statutes that sometimes play here. we're not trying to complicate it. It's the reason why we have some partnerships with folks that have a really good sense, uh, of what is happening at these local county jurisdictions. And therefore, Jim, I think that's what we're also emphasizing is we'd like to identify with those on the call and listening later where there are places that seem to be leaning in, where there's
Yep.
already champions. uh, yes, we'll do education, we'll do awareness, we'll do, advocacy, but we really want to work with each of you and see where there are, the conditions seem to be pretty favorable for us to introduce this as a solution set.
Got it. I would bring up a couple things. We at Entoro have a pretty robust proprietary set of research materials that we've done on a number of sectors in the natural capital space. If anyone has an interest, we can make those available. Um, I would also um, just highlight the concept of investment grade in that slide deck. I would like to tweak that a little bit,
Right.
Richard, mainly because that actually has a defined meaning to me in the sense that investment grade having something is being rated. So some of these may or may not be rated. So I want to make sure we're clear on that. John, you actually asked a lot of good questions here. I was trying to read those at the same time as,
Well, he's
as
been up
whoever.
longer. He's over in Australia. He's had probably 10 cups of coffee, and he's a couple hours ahead of us, Jim. So I do want to set up a separate call
I
with
would be happy to do that, John. You asked a question on blockchain. Our Capturiant registry, we use Adara. If that's of interest, we do that. And if it's a financial instrument, we can actually do that on our own transfer agent, and we can create that immediately when we create the security. And to the chagrin of most blockchains, we can do it for less than $500. So we do have that capability, but we're also open to any potential chain out there. I've been a big blockchain guy for the last 10 years. I actually held the first energy blockchain conference in the world back in 2016. So I'm very much into that. And by the way, through many of our processes, we use a lot of the current AI tools to expedite what we do. So we actually have a huge leveraging in the processing and everything. And at the end of the day, we ourselves use a pretty heavy tech stack to get things done and done quickly.
Hey, Jim, we've got 8 minutes. What I'd like to do for the last 8 minutes is there's a couple of folks that I've had a chance to talk with before this call. All right. Some of y'all are on the development side, some of y'all are on the investment real estate side. Um, you know, are we missing something? Is there something that you want more deeper dive into? And then of course we're the both teams in Toro and Roar are available, for calls with you and your team. Jim, what I was going to say a little bit earlier, let me come back to this. What we're not is we are not creating the New York Stock Exchange of natural capital resilience. That's so when we say the word market and exchange, what we're really trying to emphasize is a buyer, a seller, an asset, a project, something that can be securitized. I don't want anybody hanging up, from this or listening to it later on, thinking that we're going to go launch an exchange. That's not what Jim and I are interested in doing, or at least at this stage in our lives are not. But what we
Well,
are saying, Jim, correct, is what we're really saying is now's the time to move the transaction in the financial investment model forward in 2026. And we'd like to work with each of you, your companies, your teams, your assets, your projects in doing that. Am I saying it again, Jim, correctly? We
uh,
are not setting up the New York
yeah, that's
Stock
well point.
Exchange. Yeah.
no. In fact, it's actually, by the way, I did get the first digital exchange license out there, but we never used it.
Right.
I'm very fluent in this space. What we're creating is the independent activities that really are OTC tradable. So meaning they're just matching buyer and seller on a over the counter basis, not a finance. However, if this market became robust enough, let's call it the resilient bond market,
Right.
Richard, is that you've got QSIPs and ISINs. QSIPs are, the indicators of North America. So Canada and the U.S. use QSIPs. The rest of the world basically uses ISIN. It's the Social Security number of securities, and
Right.
so it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just a way to track these things that they can be exchanged. But we're not looking at creating a centralized exchange ourselves. Those already exist, and in fact, you could use the NYSE, you could use the Texas Stock Exchange, you could use
Right.
many of the ATSs, the alternative trading systems that are out there. But that is not where the value proposition is. The value
Right.
proposition is being able to solve a problem, create that instrument for a particular purpose. How it actually gets transacted, who holds it on their balance sheet, who maintains the custody of that, who does the transferring of that. Those are just capital markets infrastructure functions.
Right. So look, I think with, the last few minutes, and I'm graciously gonna, Jim, point out a couple of folks to you that we've had some great conversations with. Jeff McCauley is on this call. And Jeff is really, really leaning into, excuse me, a way to move the natural capital markets forward as well. And so, Jeff, I'd love for us to, follow up on this call with you and make sure, from your perspective, we've got David Moffett from Oppenheimer, who's part of our state and local public finance world. And Oppenheimer is really helping us move forward on how we look at these resilience bonds in these special purpose districts. Brad Doxer, who's on our board, is probably the leader, not just in the United States, Jim, but globally. Sits on, as a trustee advisor to the Urban Land Institute, his own company, um, has been a leader in already these areas of green and sustainable. So what we're really saying on this call is we've put the pieces in place. The structures are there. We've got the capability of working with Intertech and Eric Ross and that group on our monitoring and verification boots on the, on what I would hope, Jim, is, and David McLean and his team at ESG Impacts, what we're saying now is let's bring some use cases to the table. Let's look at projects that you think may benefit, not just from what you're seeing here, but from the larger capital investment stack. And the best way, I think, Jim, to prove this out is to start doing projects and showing that this can be scaled, whether it's our looking at things in California and the post wildfires, both in California and Colorado. I think we are poised now, if but for the lack of now getting you all on this call and others who listen to come forward with some use cases. Jim, I think that's the best way for
Uh,
us as a next step.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would add one thing, and it's great that you have partners like Oppenheimer, et cetera, that are MSRB, which is Municipal Securities Rulemaking, whatever board I think is the actual acronym, which is actually the securities of municipals, right? Governments.
Yep.
I can create the instrument, but I'm actually not MSRB myself right now. Um, and what to me is that is a great way to have that instrument being being sold, right?
Yep.
So that's a very technical thing under the U.S. securities rules.
And I think, Jim, one other part as we wrap up is, there's a couple of folks on the call that are putting developments together. They're putting land under, contract. They're moving this ball forward. I think what we want to make sure is that we're able to give you the tools and the information when you're talking to a local jurisdiction, talking, about your land use, that we can help you move this forward as well. So, all in all, Jim, we look at this group as being, you know, ones that we want to serve and support your goals and ambitions. And we want to make sure you've got whatever tools, information from us that support and advocate for, whether it's a county that's going to do a resilience bond, or create a resilient zone. Uh, Mark Paisano is on here from California, one of the leaders, Jim, in the whole enhanced infrastructure financing district initiative across California that's now moved into these critical resilience districts. We would be remiss in not making sure that we can create, information and tools that are a force multiplier to your
to,
benefits.
to everybody's benefit. But
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. We're at the top of the hour, Richard. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you want to uh, close out.
Yeah, go to
And
that
as I
next
mentioned,
slide, Will. Yeah. Here's our
we're,
contact information. Jim, Will Baird, part of the team at Entoro. And thank you, Will, for all your heavy lifting and work over the past couple of weeks to get Jim and I focused in the middle of travel and the holidays and all. But this is where, we all can be reached and contacted. And I thank you, Jim, for your patience in working through, this guy that's got a government English degree, which qualifies me to be a dog catcher somewhere in the world. But we're ready, and we're ready to get going. Look forward to your feedback, as well as, again, Jim, if we need to do one-on-one calls and make sure we're shaping and customizing how we deliver this for and with you, both this and the overall capital stack, we're ready to go. So, Jim, with that, thank you to
you're
you and your
welcome.
team. Thank you to those who are on this call, who have given us some initial interest and feedback. We stand adjourned.
Thanks, y'all.